No one expected that amid the sheer cliffs of Mount Arbel. Overlooking the calm waters of the Sea of Galilee, there existed a secret that would confound both historians and theologians. In a small cave, hidden by natural rockfall for nearly 2 millennia, archaeologists found a small limestone box sealed with wax, a form of protection reserved for objects of private and important importance. There was no pattern, no decoration, no trace of ritual. Yet the care with which it was hidden spoke louder than any detail. When the crusty outer layer was removed, the inside of the box revealed a rolled-up piece of leather, wrapped in a cloth that had almost completely rotted. Under a specialized light, faint writing emerged. What stunned experts was not the fact that this was an ancient document, but the language it was written in, Aramaic, the everyday language of first-century Jews, the language that Jesus and his family used every day. The uneven, shaky lines did not resemble the writing of a trained scribe or teacher of the law. They resembled the writing of someone tired, anxious, or in a hurry. The most controversial part is right in the first line, "To my brother." Just 3 words, but enough to spark a global debate in its historical context. This title could have multiple meanings. It could mean a biological brother, a younger brother, or a brother in the faith, a way that rabbis still use to refer to those who share a responsibility. But when juxtaposed with the emotional tone of the text, some scholars argue that the person being referred to may be James the Just, a man who later led the Jerusalem community and is described in many extra-biblical sources as a just, calm, and influential man. What sets the letter apart from any familiar religious text is its tone. There are no teachings, no miracles, no commands, no symbolic images. The writing is heavy with darkness, almost the weariness of someone who feels the burden of truth is too great for him. A passage in an early draft suggests that these days have become heavy, but the light from the beginning remains unchanged. The writer is both reassuring the recipient and reassuring himself. That sentiment is rare in formal religious texts, where the language is often declarative or instructive. This raises the big question: could this be a private confession from Jesus himself? Many researchers have been cautious in rejecting this hypothesis, arguing that carbon dating, ink testing, and careful phonetic comparisons are needed. Some linguistic details are considered to be somewhat later in time, but even they admit the genuine feeling that the text brings is difficult to replicate, especially the combination of simplicity and psychological depth. What is certain is that the location where the letter was hidden, the Arbel Cave, fits perfectly into the context of the early Christian period. A place of refuge for Jewish resistance groups, a place of refuge for persecuted families, and a safe place for those who wanted to keep something important but could not let it fall into the hands of the authorities or enemies. No one can claim authenticity, but there's no denying that the letter, real or symbolic, opens a door that leads us closer to a very human aspect: sadness, loneliness, and the desire to be understood. And that's what makes this discovery so strangely fascinating. As researchers began to examine the cave more closely, they realized that the letter was no random find. Mount Arbel, known for its steep cliffs and rocky outcrops, had served as a refuge for many different groups. In the 1st century, it saw revolts against Rome, waves of fugitives, and small groups trying to preserve their religious identity during a time of political upheaval. It made sense that a private letter, possibly containing sensitive sentiments, would be hidden there. What's remarkable is how the stone box was covered by rocks and soil for centuries. Some archaeologists believe it was the result of a natural landslide, but it's also possible that it was deliberately sealed to prevent the Romans from finding it. The sediments, the dampness of the cave, and the wax seal suggest that whoever kept it knew the risk of deterioration over time, which means the contents of the letter must have been important enough for someone to risk climbing a dangerous cliff to hide it. The initial content captured by intensive scanning describes short, fragmented sentences, more emotional than argumentative. Linguists have found that the handwriting is uneven, the ink has faded with age, and some of the wording sounds like it came from someone unfamiliar with long texts. This has led many to believe that the words are those of someone experiencing stress or in a state of deep emotional distress. One researcher described it as more breathy than sentence-like, a fairly neutral description that suggests emotional depth. Certain phrases that appear in the rough translation suggest the writer's loneliness, not the loneliness of a spiritual leader, but a loneliness very close to human life. The feeling of bearing a truth so great that no one understands. The feeling of seeing what is coming, but being unable to stop it. The feeling of having to offer words of comfort to loved ones even when one is wavering. If the writer were anyone else, the letter would still be a valuable document. But if the writer were Jesus, as some cautious opinions have suggested, the way it expresses emotions offers a very different perspective on his humanity. Fragile yet resolute, weary yet clinging to hope. Yet scholars are not shy about raising scientific doubts. Some linguistic details seem slightly different from other Aramaic fragments from the same period. Some grammatical patterns are rare or may have been used at a later date. These points have led them to question whether the letter is a later record or a text written in the turbulent times after Jesus' death. That does not make the letter any less valuable, but it does open up the possibility that it is the echo of a community trying to preserve the memory of its teacher. Yet the text's emotional power remains. One Jewish scholar remarked, "The real value of this text lies not simply in who wrote it, but in what it reveals about the people of its time, people burdened with beliefs and fears in a world of uncertainty." This remark somewhat calms the heated debate and reminds us that sometimes ancient texts don't have to be the words of great figures to be important. They matter because they convey the mood and spirit of an era. Many people are fascinated by the details of the letter, which has no trace of preaching or teaching. It is like a confession, an inner monologue sent by mistake to the 21st century, and because of that, it makes people endlessly curious. As tentative translations of the letter began to circulate in academic and media circles, public reaction was mixed. Some believers were deeply moved by the human tone of the letter. For them, whether or not it was written by Jesus, its message of forgiveness, human weariness, and concern about how one's name is used could well have been reflected in the mind of any great religious figure. These people believed that the value of the text lay not only in its authenticity, but also in the raw emotion it conveyed. Emotions that many other ancient texts lack because of their ritualistic and didactic nature. But there are other, more cautious voices. Historians warn that there have been many instances of forged documents appearing on the antiquities market, carefully crafted to create buzz. They point out that the sudden appearance of a document so valuable, in such perfect condition, always requires a rigorous authentication process, from carbon analysis to chemical examination of the ink layer to the classification of the sealing wax. These experts do not deny the strong emotions the letter evokes, but they do not want the public to go too far without solid evidence. They emphasize that in science, caution is never too much. Yet, strangely, even the most skeptical scholars agree that the letter, genuine or not, offers a rare glimpse into how people thought and felt at the time. The phrase, "the light from the beginning," remains unchanged, and the call to forgive those who use my name too hastily reflect a heart that lived in conflict, wanting to maintain the truth while also protecting others from misunderstanding. These emotional layers are not typically recorded in religious texts of the time, and that is what makes this discovery so special. Some theologians have argued that if the text comes from the early Christian community, and not necessarily from Jesus, it is still a valuable window into a time when faith and fear mingled like rushing waters. They argue that the letter's ambiguity makes it a valuable document, reflecting the intersection of humanity and faith, of personal pain and the burden of a responsibility greater than oneself. Socially, the letter has prompted a renewed public debate. Where does the line between historical man and religious figure lie? We are accustomed to seeing Jesus through his miracles and teachings, but we rarely imagine him having moments of vulnerability, of feeling alone in a task no one else understood. That does not diminish his religious role. If anything, it makes his legacy more relevant and real. The debates over its authenticity may last for years, even decades. But what is certain is that the letter has touched something deep within many people, a desire to better understand the human side of figures we have grown accustomed to viewing through the prism of sanctity, and whether or not future archaeology confirms or disproves the document. The letter will continue to live in the popular imagination as a voice from the past reminding us that even the most revered people are vulnerable and sad. Ultimately, the important question the letter leaves behind is not who wrote it, but what can we learn from it? Perhaps the most important thing the text raises is the fact that behind every creed, every miracle, every story that builds a religion, there is a human being trying to live out what he or she believes in a changing world. And perhaps it is that human part that connects us to them across thousands of years of history.